my girlfriend trying to seduce my best friend on Valentine's Day, but that was just the beginning. If you've ever felt the floor drop from beneath you, if you've ever had your heart crushed by someone you thought you'd grow old with, then you already know. You already know the kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt, it rewires something inside you. That night changed everything for me. Not just because I saw the woman I loved wrapping herself around my best friend, but because of what I found out afterward. This wasn't just cheating. This was a setup. A twisted game. A so-called loyalty test, designed by someone else, but carried out with such intention, it left scars deeper than I ever imagined. I know that sounds insane. Trust me, it felt insane living it. One minute I was planning a quiet Valentine's dinner with the woman I'd been with for almost a decade. The next, I was standing in a stranger's kitchen doorway, watching her lean into my best friend, whispering in his ear, flipping her hair like she was auditioning for some romance drama, while I stood there like a fool, invisible. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I just watched. Stunned. Frozen. Because in that moment, I realized something far worse than being cheated on. I realized the person who used to love me didn't even respect me anymore. But what I didn't know then, what would hit me like a wrecking ball days later, was that it wasn't even her idea. She was being groomed. Manipulated. Fed lies and fantasies by someone who claimed to be her friend, all to test if my best friend would stay loyal in a moment of temptation. But here's the thing, the test worked too well. She didn't just play a role. She started to believe it. She fell into the trap so deep, she forgot who she was before it began. And when I walked away, she didn't beg for forgiveness. She tried to destroy me. She rewrote the narrative, lied to everyone we knew, and nearly cost me everything I'd spent years building, all because her twisted fantasy came crashing down and I refused to play the villain in her story. So yeah, this isn't just a story about cheating. It's a story about manipulation. About losing everything you thought was real. And about the war that comes after the heartbreak, the one where you have to fight for your name, your dignity, and your peace. And if you think it ends there, you haven't heard the rest yet. Because the betrayal wasn't over. If this story hit home, drop a 1 in the comments, let me know you're out there. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Subscribe for more real stories, raw truth, and the kind of healing they don't teach you in books. Thank you for being here. Your presence means more than you know. It had only just begun. It's almost funny how love can sneak up on you in the most ordinary moments. I wasn't supposed to go to prom that night. My original date had bailed last minute, said she was getting back with her ex, classic teenage drama. I was standing in the school parking lot, hands in my pockets, about ready to head home and bury myself in some late-night gaming when Lena walked by. She was in this deep blue prom dress, hair curled, heels in one hand, and frustration written all over her face. Her ride had ditched her too. Her phone was dead, and she was trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't know her that well back then, just enough to recognize her from a few classes, but something about her that night pulled me in. Maybe it was the way she laughed when I offered her a ride in my dad's old '67 Mustang, or the fact that she actually knew what a 289 V8 engine was. She wasn't just humoring me either, she genuinely liked cars. Her dad restored classics too, and we ended up geeking out in the school parking lot for half an hour before even walking inside. That prom turned out to be one of the best nights of my life. Not because of the dance or the music, which honestly sucked, but because for the first time, I met someone who wasn't trying to be anything other than herself. She made fun of the DJ's playlist with me, ordered the biggest plate of cheese fries at the after-party diner, and didn't pretend to be not hungry just to look cute. That was Lena, unfiltered, real, and effortlessly magnetic. We stayed in touch after that night, and within weeks, we were inseparable. Through college, we made long-distance work. She went to state, I went to tech. Every other weekend, I'd take the bus or drive my beat-up Civic across 3 hours of highway just to see her. When we couldn't visit, we'd play Rocket League and co-op games late into the night. Truth be told, she was better than me at most of them, and she loved reminding me of it. We didn't have much back then, but it felt like we had everything we needed. After graduation, life got more serious. I started a tech consulting business with my best friend, Kyle. We were two idealistic idiots who turned down corporate job offers to chase a dream from my garage. Everyone told us we were insane, except Lena. She believed in us more than we did. She worked a basic entry-level job at some marketing agency, but she'd swing by late at night with energy drinks and cheap takeout, just to sit with us while we coded until sunrise. When we couldn't afford a designer, she learned basic HTML and CSS just to help us build our first client site. She even came up with our company name and designed our first logo on Canva with a cracked laptop and a bottle of wine. She never once complained, never asked for anything in return. She was there in the trenches with us, a partner in every sense of the word. When we finally landed our first big client, it felt like we'd won the lottery. We upgraded from the garage to a small office space. Lena got promoted at work too, and we moved into a decent apartment downtown. I bought a used Harley and we started spending weekends riding out to coffee shops and roadside diners, just like old times. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt stable. It felt like we were building something together, not just a career, but a future. I still remember those lazy Sunday mornings. She'd steal my hoodies, make pancakes while humming off-key to 90s songs, then curl up beside me on the couch with her feet under a blanket and a controller in her hand. We weren't chasing status or followers. We weren't networking or trying to climb some social ladder. We just had each other, and back then, that felt like enough. But looking back now, I realize those were the calm before the storm, the final stretch of peace before everything started to crack.
The cabin moves on around her
as if
nothing happened. The businessman across the aisle barely glances up, too focused on whatever deal he's closing on his laptop. The young couple a few rows ahead chat quietly, oblivious of the moment. No one else has been asked about their seat. No one else has had to prove they belong. A flight attendant passes by, offering champagne to a white man in expensive suit. Her voice warm, professional, effortless. Then Karen returns, standing over Amar once again. Can I get you something to drink? The words are polite, but the way she says them isn't. Her tone is flat. The warmth she showed the others noticeably absent. Amara lets it be a silent stretch between them before answering.
She worked in marketing for some startup and had this way of turning every casual conversation into a TED talk about leveraging your personal brand and optimizing social capital.
Tapping one perfectly manicured nail against the armrest.
She shook my hand like I was a potential investor, not her boyfriend's best friend.
Karen has no idea who she's just played with. Amara leans back in her seat, watching as Karen moves seamlessly to the cabin, offering drinks with warm smiles and effortless charm.
Lena didn't seem all that impressed with Sierra either.
She serves the businessman across the aisle first, setting down a fresh glass of champagne with a polished ease that suggests years of catering to privilege. Here you go, sir.
Girls' nights,
enjoy.
networking events,
the older man barely acknowledges
where the menus didn't have
too
prices.
engrossed in his laptop to notice the subtle change in her demeanor.
Her usual
Karen
jeans
moves on,
and sneakers
approaching the honeymooners,
and heels,
seated a few
skipping
rows
our weekend
ahead.
car meets to
Mia,
attend some branding
a
seminar
bright-eyed
Sierra
woman in a
recommended.
white sundress,
She
beams
started
up at the
talking
attendant.
differently.
Could I have
words
orange
like
juice,
connections
please?
and growth mindset,
Of course.
slipping into
Karen
conversations
says,
that used to be
her
about
voice
video
light,
games
friendly.
and late-night
She
diner
turns to
runs.
Jordan, who rests an
shrugged
arm
it
around
off.
Mia's shoulders.
People evolve,
And for you, sir,
right?
I'll take a
She was
ginger
still
ale.
Lena, still
he
the
replies.
same girl who used to pick
Karen
grease
nods,
out from under her
handing
nails
them their
after
drinks
helping
with
me with an
practiced
oil
ease.
change.
Even pausing
Just
to
because she
exchange a
wanted
few
to expand her
pleasantries
world
about
didn't
their
mean she was
destination.
leaving ours
Then,
behind.
without missing a beat,
That's what
she
I told
continues down
myself
the road,
when she started spending
serving
more
each
time with
passenger
Sierra,
in turn,
when our Friday night
ensuring
gaming
everyone
sessions
is
turned
seen,
into her being too
acknowledged, and
tired after
accommodated.
an industry mixer.
Everyone except Amara.
The first
Minutes
real gut
pass.
punch came when she
The
walked into
businessman
our
across the
apartment one
aisle
evening,
already has
holding
a
up
second
designer
glass of
dress in a
champagne.
shade of deep red.
The honeymooners have
Something
been
so far
offered
from her
snacks to
usual
go with
style
their
it might
drinks.
as well have
But
belonged to a
Amara's
stranger.
water? Nowhere in sight.
Sierra helped me pick
She
it
presses
out,
the call
she
button.
said, her
The
voice
soft ding
casual,
cutting through the
like it was
ambient
no
hum of the
big
cabin.
deal.
Karen returns,
She says I should
her
start dressing for
expression
the
carefully
future I
neutral.
want, not the one I have.
Yes. Amara
I tried
meets
to
her
laugh it
gaze,
off, Made a
voice
joke
calm.
about how I must have
I
missed the
asked for
dress
water
code change
earlier.
for our next game
Karen's
night.
lips pressed together in a
But
tight
she
line.
didn't laugh.
Her fingers curling
Instead,
around the tray
she
she's
gave
holding.
me this look,
We're
half
still
amused,
getting everything
half
sorted.
condescending, before
She replies,
saying, "Not
her tone
everything has
clipped.
to be pizza and
Amara's
PlayStation,
eyes flicked to the
Ethan.
tray. Nearly
Maybe it's
empty
time
now.
to start thinking
Just
bigger."
a few scattered glasses
That
left.
was the moment I
You
first
seem to
felt
have
it,
everything
the
for
shift.
everyone else.
Like I was
For a
standing on
split
solid
second,
ground, but it was
something
tilting
flashes
just
in
enough
Karen's
to make me
expression,
question my
a
balance.
flicker of annoyance,
I wanted
of
to
something
believe
more
it was
raw
just a
beneath the
phase,
surface.
that she was
Then,
just
just
caught
as
up in
quickly,
something new and
she
exciting,
schools her
and that
features back
eventually
into control.
she'd come back to
I'll
the
get
world
when
we
I
built
can,
together.
she says,
But the problem with
before
ignoring
turning and
cracks
walking
is that
away
they don't
without
go
another
away.
word. David
They
Sloan,
spread.
the businessman,
And by the
pauses
time
his
you
typing.
notice how deep
He's
they
been
run,
trained
it's
to
already
tune out
too late.
distractions, to stay
Valentine's
focused on
Day
work
used to be
even
our
in the
thing.
middle of long-haul flights.
Not because we went
But
all
something
out with
about the
flowers
exchange
and
pulls
candlelit
his
dinners.
attention.
We weren't
He's
that couple.
flown first class for years,
We had our own way of
familiar with the way
celebrating.
service flows,
Homemade
effortless,
burgers, a new co-op
uninterrupted.
game, a
He's
cheap
never had to
bottle of
ask
wine,
twice
and
for
a
a drink.
blanket on the
The
couch.
thought lingers, but he
It
doesn't
wasn't
dwell on it.
glamorous, but it was real.
Instead, he adjusts
It
his
was
cufflink,
us.
clears his
That's why
throat,
it felt
and goes back
strange
to his
when Lena
laptop.
told me that Kyle
Mia,
and Sierra
on
were
the other
hosting a
hand,
small dinner
doesn't let
party
it go
for
so
Valentine's this
easily.
year, and that
She
she
nudges
really wanted
Jordan,
us to
whispering,
go.
"Did you see
I didn't
that?"
think much of it at first.
Jordan glances back.
I figured it was
See
just
what?
another one of Sierra's
She
pretentious
completely
networking
ignored her.
excuses wrapped
Jordan
in a holiday
frowned
vow.
slightly,
I
looking over his
agreed,
shoulder.
even though I
He
would have
hadn't been
preferred
paying
to stay
attention
in.
before, but
I
now
thought,
that Mia
one night
mentions
of
it,
fake smiles
the interaction
and
does
overpriced
feel
appetizers
off.
couldn't kill me.
Maybe it was just a
But
mistake.
then Lena spent almost
Mia
4
shakes
hours
her
getting
head.
ready.
No.
She
She
locked
skipped her
herself
on
in the
purpose.
bathroom the entire
Jordan
afternoon,
exhales,
curling her hair,
leaning back in
redoing
his
her
seat.
makeup 3
What are we
times,
supposed to do
trying
about
on
it?
different dresses
Mia
like she
doesn't
was
answer
prepping
right
for a
away.
red carpet.
Instead,
I
she
leaned
looks
on the
toward
doorframe
Amara,
at one
who
point
sits
and half
composed,
jokingly
unmoved,
asked if we were
as
heading
if the
to a
entire
gala I
moment
hadn't
meant
heard
nothing.
about.
But Mia can
She
feel
didn't
it,
even smile.
an undercurrent of tension,
Just told me she wanted
quiet
to look
but
her
sharp.
best.
And now that she's
When
seen
she
it,
finally stepped
she
out,
can't unsee
I
it.
swear I
The
didn't
dinner
even
service
recognize her
begins,
at
and
first.
Karen moves with the same
The red
effortless
dress
charm
she
she
wore
has
wasn't
perfected
just new.
over the years.
It was bold,
With a
sleek,
trained
and
smile,
expensive looking,
she stops
with a
beside
slit
David
that went
Sloan's
higher
seat
than
and
anything I'd
leans
ever
slightly
seen her
toward
wear.
her. "We have 2
Her makeup
options
was
for dinner
heavier,
tonight,"
her
she
hairstyle in a
announces,
way that
her
screamed
tone
statement.
warm, inviting.
It wasn't the
Grilled
Lena I knew.
salmon with
It was a
vegetables or
curated
pasta
version,
with
like
a
she'd
creamy
become
sauce.
someone else for the
Which
evening.
would you prefer?
On the way
David
to
doesn't
Kyle's
even glance
place,
up from his
she
laptop.
barely spoke.
"Salmon," he says,
She spent the
distracted,
entire ride
already
glued to her
reaching
phone,
for the glass of
touching
wine
up her
beside
lipstick
him.
at every red
"Excellent
light,
choice,"
not once asking
Karen
me about my
replies,
day or our
setting a
business or
steaming plate
anything.
in front of him with practiced
I tried to
ease.
tell her about a new
She moves
contract
down the
we were
row,
close to landing,
repeating the
but
same
she
line
waved
for
me
each
off,
passenger,
said she needed to focus
accommodating their
before we got
preferences
there.
without hesitation. Then
Focus
she
on what?
reaches Amara. For
That
the first
question
time,
haunted me more
Karen
than I
hesitates.
realized at the time.
The pleasant expression
The
on her
moment
face
we walked
dims,
into the apartment,
her eyes
she
narrowing
detached
just
from me
slightly
completely.
before she speaks.
Didn't
"We
wait
have
for
2
me to take
options
off my
tonight,"
jacket.
she
Didn't
says,
introduce me
her
to the
voice
new people.
devoid of the
Didn't
warmth she
even
had
glance
moments
back
ago.
to see if I was
"Grilled
following
salmon
her.
with vegetables or pasta
She made a beeline
with
for
a creamy
Kyle.
sauce."
Not
Amara
Sierra,
meets her
not the other
gaze steadily.
guests, Kyle.
"I'll have the salmon."
And the way she lit
Karen's
up around
fingers
him, it
tighten
wasn't
around the
subtle.
tray. "We're out of
She
salmon."
laughed at everything he said
A
like
pause.
he was the funniest
A
man
long,
alive.
heavy pause.
She leaned in
Amara's
close when he
eyes
talked,
flicked
touched
briefly
his
to
arm when
David's
she
plate,
laughed, flipped
where
her
he's
hair
already
every
cutting
few
into a
seconds like
perfect
she was
portion of salmon.
auditioning for a shampoo
Steam
commercial.
still rising from the fresh
I stood
meal.
across the room,
She glances
watching
toward
this
the young
unfold
couple in
with a
front of her.
tightening knot in my
Mia's
stomach.
plate. 2.
At
Old
first,
salmon.
I thought
The
maybe I was
golden
just
crust
overthinking.
glistening under the cabin lights.
Maybe it was innocent.
She looks back at Karen.
Maybe I was being
Karen
paranoid.
doesn't flinch. The
But
moment
then came
stretches,
dinner.
tense and silent. Amara doesn't need to ask why. She already knows. Then, finally, she tilts her head slightly and says, "Then I'll have the pasta." Karen sets the plate down with just a little too much force. The silverware rattles. "Enjoy," she mutters before turning sharply and walking away. Amara inhales slowly. She doesn't move, doesn't reach for a fork right away. Instead, she lets the moment settle around her, lets herself fully absorb the weight of it. Her fingers curl slightly against the armrest. It's not the first time she's dealt with something like this. It won't be the last.
Sierra had placed fancy little name cards on the table, another one of her Instagram perfect details. Somehow, in the shuffle between drinks and small talk, Lena accidentally switched the cards around. She ended up sitting next to Kyle, and I was stuck at the far end between two people I didn't even know. I kept glancing down the table, watching her whisper into his ear, giggle over shared bites of food, leaning so close their shoulders touched. It wasn't playful or friendly, it was intimate. Too intimate. I caught Kyle glancing my way a few times, like he knew it was wrong but didn't know how to stop it. Sierra, for her part, said nothing. just sat back with a smug little smirk, watching everything unfold like she was directing a scene she had already written. Then came the final blow. Lena knocked over her wine glass, spilling it all down the front of her red dress. She gasped dramatically, making a scene, and turned to Kyle. "Can you help me clean this up?" she asked, voice high and sweet, like she was in a rom-com. He hesitated, but she grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the kitchen. I sat there frozen, watching them disappear behind the swinging door. I waited. 30 seconds. Then a minute. Something in my chest cracked open, and I stood up. I pushed the door open slowly, quietly, hoping, praying, that I was just being crazy. But what I saw stopped me cold. Lena had Kyle cornered near the sink. Her back to me, fingers trailing lightly down his arm, her voice low and flirtatious. Kyle stood stiff, awkward, holding a paper towel like a barrier between them. I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, letting the scene burn into my memory. When Lena finally turned and saw me, her entire face shifted. Shock, then guilt, then something far worse, indignation. "Are you spying on me now?" she snapped. "Seriously, Ethan? You don't trust me enough to let me talk to my friend without acting like a jealous maniac?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to stay calm, asked her what the hell she thought she was doing. She rolled her eyes. "This is exactly what Sierra meant when she said you're holding me back. You think I'm your little sidekick forever? Maybe I want more than garage tools and game nights." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't losing her. I had already lost her. I hadn't planned to go home early that day. We'd just closed a new deal, a big one, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe things were finally turning around. I'd been crashing at my brother's place ever since the Valentine's party disaster, trying to put some distance between me and the wreckage that used to be my life. I didn't tell anyone I was heading back. I just wanted to grab a few things from the apartment and maybe have a real conversation with Lena if she was around, if there was anything left to talk about. The weather was surprisingly warm for February, so I took the bike. I remember feeling the wind on my face, thinking maybe that ride would help clear my head. It didn't. The moment I pulled into the lot, my gut twisted. Kyle's truck was parked in my spot, the one I paid extra for so I could keep the bike out of the sun. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he was just dropping something off. Maybe they were meeting to talk about the fallout from the party. Maybe I was just being paranoid again. But even as those thoughts passed through my mind, my hands were already curling into fists. I still had my key, thank God I hadn't mailed it back when she asked. The second I stepped inside, I heard music. Not just any music, our playlist. The one Lena made for our first anniversary. All those soft, cheesy, sentimental songs we used to laugh at and secretly love. I froze. That playlist didn't just play on shuffle. You had to choose it manually. My heart was pounding by the time I walked toward the living room. And there they were. Lena and Kyle. Sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't shattered everything between us just days before. She was wearing the same red dress from the party, like she'd kept it ready, waiting for a second performance. A cheese board sat between them, fancy crackers, grapes, artisan cheeses, all the little things Lena used to make when we had celebration nights. Kyle looked up first. His face went pale, lips parting like he wanted to explain something, but no words came out. Lena looked startled for a second, then annoyed, like I was the one intruding on her private moment. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't hear what she said. My blood was roaring in my ears. My vision tunneled. All I could see was the couch where we used to sit, where she now leaned closer to the man who had stood beside me through everything, until now. I didn't scream. I didn't lash out. I didn't even ask why. I just turned and walked out. The hallway blurred around me, my boots echoing down the floor like gunshots. I heard her behind me, her heels clicking faster, calling my name like she actually thought I would stop. She grabbed my arm just before the elevator doors opened, crying, babbling something about how it wasn't what it looked like, how she invited him over to talk about me, to ask for his help convincing me to come back. I stared at her, silent. Her mascara was smudging, her lip trembling, but the performance didn't move me. She pointed to the cheese board, said it was just something they put together last minute. Said the playlist was a coincidence. Said the dress was just what she happened to be wearing. All lies. Lazy, desperate lies. I didn't respond. I didn't curse. I didn't even look back. I stepped into that elevator, let the doors close in front of her tear-streaked face, and left the woman I had loved for 10 years standing there in the hallway, wrapped in a red dress that now felt like the color of everything I'd lost. It had been 2 weeks since I walked out of that apartment, and I still hadn't heard a word that made sense. Lena kept texting, calling, sending long-winded messages that bounced between pleading apologies and half-baked excuses. Kyle tried reaching out too, left voicemails with long pauses and awkward stammering, always ending with, "Can we talk?" But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time my phone buzzed, it felt like a jolt to the chest. I buried myself in work, lived in the office, barely slept. I didn't know what I was waiting for, closure, maybe, or some kind of clarity. But what I got instead came from the last person I ever expected. It started with a ping from our group chat, one I'd muted since everything fell apart. Dozens of notifications lit up my screen at once, people tagging me, dropping messages like bombs. I almost ignored it, figured it was just more gossip, until I saw one line that stopped me cold. "Sierra just sent an email to everyone, you need to see this." My stomach dropped. I opened my inbox, and there it was, an email from Sierra with the subject line, "The truth you deserve." I clicked it open, and what I read didn't just shock me, it lit a fire in my chest that I didn't know I was still capable of feeling. It wasn't a message, it was a full-blown confession, pages long, written like some twisted memoir. She admitted everything. Every manipulative scheme, every lie, every calculated move she made leading up to that night. She wrote that she had been planning a loyalty test for Kyle months before the Valentine's party. Said she'd read some article online about testing a man's commitment before marriage, and the idea got stuck in her head. She couldn't shake the thought that Kyle might cheat, so instead of trusting him, she decided to engineer a scenario to verify his loyalty. And for that, she needed bait. That's where Lena came in. Sierra had been grooming Lena for months, slowly convincing her that she was outgrowing me, that she deserved more, that Kyle was the real alpha, the real success behind our company. She shared screenshots of their private conversations, dozens of them, where she coached Lena on how to talk, how to dress, how to act around Kyle to push his boundaries. She told her to wear that red dress. She helped plan the flirtation. She even told Lena to sit beside him at dinner and act like she was drawn to him, to test if Kyle would stay faithful or give in. At first, Lena hesitated. There were texts where she pushed back, saying it felt wrong, that she didn't want to disrespect me. But Sierra kept pushing, kept feeding her the same poison. "Ethan's holding you back, you deserve someone who challenges you, this is just a test, not real." And somewhere along the way, Lena stopped pretending. She stopped playing a role and started believing the script. Her messages shifted, she started talking about Kyle like he was already hers, started confiding in Sierra about how he made her feel seen in ways I didn't. That's when the game turned into something else. Sierra admitted that after the Valentine's party, she tried to shut it down. She saw Lena spiraling, saw her taking it too far. But it was already out of control. Lena had caught real feelings, and Sierra couldn't rein her back in. That night at the apartment, the playlist, the wine, the dress, it wasn't Sierra's plan. That was Lena going rogue, trying to turn fantasy into reality. Kyle, according to Sierra, had no idea any of this was happening. He thought Lena's advances were just weird behavior. He never saw the bigger picture until he found messages on Sierra's phone that exposed everything. That's when he flipped out, confronted her, demanded she come clean. And she did, by forwarding it all to the entire group. The screenshots were brutal. There were messages between Sierra and Lena making fun of me, calling me small-minded, stuck in a garage lifestyle, saying things like Ethan doesn't have the presence for big spaces. There were plans to stage more accidental interactions between Lena and Kyle, conversations dissecting every little move he made, trying to gauge his reactions like he was some lab rat. The level of manipulation, the psychological games, they weren't just cruel. They were calculated, methodical, surgical. I read through every line, each one cutting deeper than the last. I sat there in the office alone, staring at the screen, hands trembling. Rage boiled beneath the surface, but it wasn't the kind you scream or throw things over. It was the cold, slow kind, the kind that settles into your bones. I'd spent weeks thinking I'd lost Lena to a moment of weakness, that maybe I could have done something different. But now I saw the truth. I hadn't lost her by accident. She'd been led away inch by inch, decision by decision, until there was nothing left of the girl I once loved. And worse, she went willingly. I thought the worst was over after Sierra's confession. I thought maybe now the truth would finally set everything straight. But I was wrong. Because what came next wasn't healing, it was hell. The very same night the email went out, my phone exploded again, this time not with questions or support, but with silence. A suffocating, heavy kind of silence. People weren't calling to apologize. They were disappearing. Friends I'd known for years suddenly stopped responding. Group chats I used to laugh in every night went quiet. Invitations dried up. Meetings got canceled. Clients postponed indefinitely. No one said anything directly. They just vanished like smoke. I didn't understand it at first, how the truth could land in everyone's inbox and still leave me looking like the villain. Then I saw what Lena had been doing behind the scenes. While I'd been drowning in confusion and betrayal, she had been rewriting the story. She didn't just lie, she orchestrated a full-blown smear campaign. She posted vague, cryptic stories on social media, pictures of her crying, captions about toxic men, emotional control, narcissistic cycles. No names, but everyone knew who she was talking about. Then came the fake screenshots, text threads that I never wrote, conversations that never happened. She edited them to make it look like I'd been controlling, possessive, even emotionally abusive. There was one that made me sick to my stomach, a message chain where it looked like I told her she wasn't allowed to go out with coworkers, that I'd track her location if she left the apartment. Another where I supposedly accused her of cheating every time she wore makeup. None of it was real. I don't even text in full sentences, ask anyone who knows me, my messages are all emojis and sarcastic one-liners. But that didn't matter. People believed her anyway. Because when you show the world a crying woman and a couple of cherry-picked screenshots, no one pauses to ask questions, they just choose a side. Even worse, she told mutual friends that I used to check her phone while she slept, that I'd monitor her social media accounts. The irony is, I'm the guy who builds security systems for a living. I've always respected privacy to the extreme. I don't even use biometric locks because I believe trust should never come with surveillance. But none of that mattered now. The narrative was out there, and I was the villain. The fallout hit fast. One of our biggest clients pulled out of a deal we'd spent months developing. Another said they'd heard concerning things about my company culture. I got called into a meeting by a longtime partner who danced around the issue but basically asked if we were creating a safe environment for women in tech. I sat there in that glass-walled office trying to defend myself against accusations that didn't even exist a month ago. I felt like I was pleading innocence in a trial no one invited me to. And in the middle of it all, I broke. Not in some dramatic, movie-style collapse. It was quieter than that. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I couldn't focus on code. I'd stare at a screen for hours and forget what I was working on. I switched gyms because I couldn't stand the way people looked at me like they were waiting for proof that the rumors were true. I started recording my phone calls, saving every message, every email, just in case I had to defend myself again. I became a shell of who I used to be. The guy who built a company from scratch, who found joy in greasy diner breakfasts and late-night rides, that guy disappeared somewhere between the lies and the silence. I remember sitting alone in my garage one night, hands stained with oil, tools scattered around me, and thinking this was all that was left. A man and a bike, surrounded by noise he couldn't silence, trying to remember who he was before everything got twisted. And the worst part wasn't losing Lena, or Kyle, or even the business. The worst part was realizing how quickly people you thought would stand beside you will vanish the moment someone hands them a prettier lie to believe. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you hit rock bottom. Not the kind they put in motivational posters, but the kind that sits heavy in your chest while you stare at your ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering how your life unraveled so fast. For weeks, I lived in that space, somewhere between grief and numbness, anger and emptiness. But then something shifted. I woke up one morning, still exhausted, still hollow, but with a new thought in my head: I'm not going to let this be the last chapter. I didn't know exactly what that meant yet, but I knew I was done sitting in the ashes. So I started building, slowly, methodically, like a man tightening bolts on a machine that had fallen apart. The first thing I did was document everything. Every message, every screenshot, every voice note. I compiled it all like a case file, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to reclaim the truth. I called a lawyer, not to sue anyone, but to understand what my options were if this smear campaign kept affecting my business. Then I restructured the company. I split from Kyle officially, rewrote contracts, rebranded the entire operation under a new name. It wasn't easy. Some clients walked, some employees had to choose sides, but most of the team stuck with me. The people who mattered saw who I really was, not who Lena made me out to be. Around that same time, something unexpected happened. Sierra's screenshots started circulating. I didn't leak them, someone else did. Maybe one of the friends she sent the email to, maybe Kyle, I'll never know. But once they hit the group chats, everything shifted. People started piecing things together, the timelines, the contradictions, the manipulation. And then the apologies came. One by one, old friends started messaging me, saying they were sorry for disappearing, that they hadn't known the full story, that they felt terrible for believing the lies. Some were sincere. Others felt like guilt dressed up in politeness. I read every message but didn't respond. I didn't need closure from people who abandoned me at the first whisper of scandal. My cousin, the one who had once screamed at me over the phone, called crying, saying she should have trusted me, saying she felt ashamed for taking Lena's side. I let her speak, listened to every word, but when she asked if we could meet and move past this, I told her I needed space. Not out of spite, but because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It just means letting go of what you thought people were. Even some clients came back. One of them told me point blank, "You handled this with more dignity than I would have." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't felt dignified. I'd felt broken. But maybe that's what healing looks like, not walking around with a smile, but getting up every day and refusing to let lies define you. And slowly, piece by piece, the noise faded. The whispers stopped. The pity glances disappeared. My name stopped being a headline in other people's gossip and returned to being mine again. And through it all, I stayed silent. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I finally understood the power of not needing to explain yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. I poured all my energy into my work, into rebuilding my life on solid ground. No more chasing validation. No more defending my worth. I let my actions speak. Let the people who stayed see who I really was. Let the people who left keep walking. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just living. Wrench in hand, back in the garage, grease under my nails, peace in my chest. No noise, no chaos, just the sound of tools clicking into place and the quiet rhythm of a man who survived the worst version of love and still found something worth building after the dust settled. It's funny how life has a way of leading you back to yourself when you least expect it. I wasn't looking for anything. Not a rebound, not a distraction, not even companionship. I was just trying to breathe again, to rebuild what little sense of peace I had left. The garage became my refuge, somewhere the world didn't ask questions, where a socket wrench and a stripped bolt were all that needed fixing. But healing has a way of creeping in quietly, through moments you don't even notice at first. Mine started at a CrossFit gym my brother dragged me to one weekend, said it'd help clear my head. I didn't care much for lifting weights, but I showed up anyway. And that's where I saw it, parked by the front door, matte black, clean lines, perfectly balanced. A Sportster 883. I didn't even look at the gym at first, I walked straight to that bike, checking out the mods, the detail, the way it had been tuned just right. That's when I heard a voice behind me, calm and confident. "You like the suspension setup?" I turned around, and there she was, Talia. She was wearing gym clothes and a ponytail, grease on her knuckles like it was nothing. I nodded, told her it was clean work. She smiled and said she'd done most of it herself. I almost didn't believe her until she started breaking down the gear ratios and explaining what she was planning to upgrade next. She didn't drop buzzwords or try to impress me. She didn't fake knowledge or pretend to be something she wasn't. She was just real. We started talking after workouts. Then rides on the weekends. Then coffee after that. She wasn't trying to brand herself, wasn't curating a persona for likes or trying to network her way into social circles. She ran the gym, coded their entire booking system herself, and spent her free time rebuilding vintage engines with her dad. She didn't wear a mask or need a script. She just showed up, authentic, grounded, and unafraid of silence. There was no comparison to Lena. Talia didn't care if I showed up in oil-stained jeans. She liked that I worked with my hands. She didn't need me to talk like a CEO. She liked the way I explained how a carburetor works better than any pitch I'd ever given. And maybe that's what struck me most, there were no games, no manipulation, no constant need to prove I was enough. With Talia, I could just be. And that felt like freedom. We rode together, fixed bikes together, argued over the best road trip playlists. But more than that, we respected each other. There was no pedestal, no power imbalance, just two people meeting in the middle, every day, by choice. Being with her didn't erase the damage Lena left behind. But it reminded me that not every woman is a storm in disguise. Some are just wind at your back, steady and real, not trying to change your direction, just ride with you while you find your own. And in that space, in that quiet steadiness, I rediscovered something I thought I'd lost for good. Not just trust in someone else, but trust in myself. In my judgment. In the version of me that didn't need polishing or posturing to be worthy of love. And maybe that's the real redemption, not replacing what was broken, but building something better, from scratch, with someone who understands the value of every single bolt. Sometimes I still think about how close I came to losing myself in someone else's story. How easy it is for love to turn into a trap when you're not looking. Not because you were blind, but because you trusted too deeply, believed too honestly, gave your heart to someone who was already halfway out the door. But maybe that's the lesson we're all afraid to learn, that betrayal doesn't always look like a knife in the back. Sometimes, it looks like a slow shift, a quiet erosion, a person you love becoming a version of themselves you can't recognize anymore. And when that happens, when everything you thought was solid starts to crack, you have to ask yourself one hard question: if the people closest to you can be groomed into betraying you, who are you really safe with? Maybe the truth is, you're safest with yourself. Your instincts. Your integrity. The quiet voice that says walk away, even when your heart begs you to stay. Because sometimes, losing someone is exactly what you need to find your real path. So now I'll ask you, would you walk away, or would you fight back? Drop your thoughts below. If you've ever been betrayed, your story might help someone else today.